So, we've taken the measurements and can now proceed to our usual activity. We are going to fit the standard sewing pattern to the client's measurements. In other words, we are getting to making a pattern of our own based on a standard pattern. In my case, the client is a dress form. That's why I've measured the dress form and the mock-up sewn to the standard pattern, which you should download to be able to start. During the work, I will be reading out the measurement results from the table. I am laying a printed copy of the calculations next to me, so as to see it at all times. And here are the pattern details I have printed out and sticked together. I have done some preliminary work with the pattern not to forget something in the making of the class footage. Never forget that the table is always there for you. The results of all the measurements of the main curves which you are to take are listed here. Still, some additionally taken measurements processed with the table may result in a more accurate pattern. And right now, I am going to show it to you. Let's begin our work on the pattern with the beginning. The first measurement value is displayed in the first column of the table. Here in the field Alteration in Front Center, you can see -1. It means that the center of the front must be decreased by 1 centimeter. I am marking off 1 centimeter into the middle of the pattern and drawing the first line. Next column in our table is called Front Side Curve on one side. It shows what alteration is needed for detail number 2, -2 centimeters. Here is this curve. This curve needs moving so as to reduce the pattern by 2 centimeters. We've got the curve line. I am moving the ruler in parallel toward the middle of the pattern and drawing a new line. And here's one important thing I will never stop reminding you about. The length of this raw edge must stay unchanged as you are moving the line this way or another. Thus, when I am drawing a new line, I always mark the top point of the initial pattern. The same goes for the lowest point. I am simply moving the line in parallel. And so this corner corresponds to this one. This is a must. This is a reference point for us to define the length of the future curve depending on different measurements, side height, clip, and so on. Still, we must know the height of the side raw edge of the initial pattern. So we moved the line. Next column is called Front Side Seam. I will work on another detail of the pattern, detail number 3. I should note that now we are only doing preliminary work on the raw edge cutting line. At this stage, it is necessary to move the entire line while preserving its original length. I'm marking the upper and the lower corners and moving the entire line of the side raw edge towards the wider part of the detail by 2 centimeters. And I always mark the notch indicating the top point of the side raw edge of the original pattern. It didn't quite fit on the paper sheet, but it's just a few millimeters, and I'll draw the line later when I am making the mock-up. So I've moved the raw edge cutting line in parallel. The following column is back side seam. This is detail number 4, the back side detail. I'm doing the same thing, moving the side raw edge line on the pattern in parallel to the wider part of the detail by 2 centimeters, while marking the top point of the initial pattern. So here we have a new side raw edge of the detail. Next thing to alter are the back and front curves. Let's begin with altering the back curve, and then we will alter the front curve too. Follow the steps I am showing to you right now. Don't rush and don't think too much at this stage because so far the table has calculated everything perfectly. Let's get to detail number 5, the center back. Let's refer to the table. The column is called Back Curves. We decrease it by 5 millimeters at the bust line, by 3 millimeters at the under bust line, and by 1 millimeter at the waistline. At the stomach line, or at the bottom line of the corset, 12 centimeters apart from the waistline, add 5 millimeters. Connecting the resulting dots with straight or smooth lines beginning from the dot on the bust line and moving downwards. We will work on the line above the bust line a little later. We have drawn a new curve line and decreased and increased the width of the detail according to the calculations of the application. I'm doing the same with the side back curve, detail number 4. We should decrease it by 5 millimeters at the bust line, by 3 millimeters at the under bust line, and by 1 millimeter at the waistline. Then add 5 millimeters along the bottom line. Let's draw a new line. Perhaps the lines are not displayed brightly enough on screen, but these are still auxiliary lines and we will have to redraw them later. And I'm trying to explain carefully how to draw these preliminary lines. I hope that watching my hands at work, you realize what we are doing here. So, let's move on to the front curve. Let's take details number 1 and 2. They make up the center curve. It is the main curve of the front. Now refer to the table. We will remove 1 millimeter at the waistline and add 5 millimeters at the bottom line of the corset. Then we'll connect the dots with a new flowing line. And repeat this for the second detail. Remember, I am only drafting at this point. Further on, we will draw some more accurate lines, and I'll highlight them with a marker. Well, the preliminary work is over. It's time for some creative work. Let's get back to these side details, namely the side raw edge, and determine its exact height. Here are details number 3 and 4. The height of the side raw edge is a distance from the waistline to the top line of the model of your garment. According to the table, the side height of the initial pattern is 3 centimeters less than what is needed based on our measurements. And here is the question we should answer. Should I cut all the details along the waistline to increase the model side height by 3 centimeters? Or should I just increase this line upwards and raise the side raw edge by 3 centimeters? To make this decision, we can take another measurement, the distance between the waist and the bust lines. This measurement is taken along the side. In this case, the measurement of the pattern from the bust line to the waistline equals 16 centimeters. And on the dress form, it is 17 centimeters. The difference is just 1 centimeter. So don't forget that if the measurement of the distance between the waist and the bust line differs by no more than 1.5 centimeters, you can simply alter the side height without cutting the details. If the dress form measured, for example, 18 centimeters or more, I would have to cut the patterns along the waistline and move their fragments apart in order to increase the side raw edge by the required value. And in such a case, it would mean cutting all 5 details of the pattern along the waistline and moving them apart by an equal value until the bust line would be in its place at the required distance, for example, 18 centimeters from the waistline. In my case, the difference in the distance from the waist to the bust line measurement is 1 centimeter. So I'm simply drawing a new bust line 1 centimeter above the bust line of the initial pattern. Since the pattern can be left uncut, I will draw the model top line on these very sheets of paper. To draw the model top line, I need to add 3 centimeters. I'm marking 3 centimeters toward the top from this point. This is why exactly we have marked off the top point of the standard pattern. So here are 3 centimeters. This is the preliminary top point of the garment side height. Its position might change though, for the sake of beauty and smoothness of the line. I will repeat all this for the back details. I am going 3 centimeters up from the top point of the pattern. Placing a new dot here. Next, we should locate the neckline position. A new neckline or the model line of the future corset are determined by clip measurements. I want to draw your attention to the following. Since the bust line has shifted up by 1 centimeter, I will be marking the clip measurement points from this new point. Despite the fact that specific values are calculated in the table, it is better not to use them because the bust line is in a different place now. If the bust line remained in the same place, it would be safe to rely on the table values. However, in our case, for accuracy, it is better to take a tape measure or ruler and mark the values in their actual size. So our client's clip toward arm's eye measurement equals 9.5 centimeters. From the highest point of the bust, draw a line at a 45-degree angle and mark 9.5 centimeters on it first. Then add 1.2 centimeters, taking into account the seam allowance. Next is the clip toward top measurement. The value in the table reads 7 centimeters. Mark 7 centimeters from the highest point of the bust, right here, and add 1.2 centimeters for seam allowance. Here we have a new dot. Let me draw the dots more clearly so everyone can see what we are getting. Remember, we are making a corset with a sweetheart neckline. This means that there should be no corner for the shoulder strap. Thus, the new dots need to be connected with a straight or convex line. Connecting the dots, we can see that the line goes above the top point of the initial curve. That makes perfect sense because we have raised the side seam by 3 centimeters. Let's draw a smooth top line and measure by how much we need to raise the top point of the curve. In my case, it is 1.8 centimeters. To ensure that the curve lengths are equal, we must also raise the curve of detail number 3 by the same amount. Here is our new line. I am drawing the lines with a marker for you to see them well. I strongly recommend drawing with a thin pencil. Now we should make final adjustments to the top line of the side detail. It is much more aesthetically pleasing when the top curve line slightly dips toward the side seam. Drawing a smooth diagonal line, I'm lowering the highest point of the side by 5 millimeters. Now, the top line of the garment will smoothly transition from the front to the back. It's impossible to accurately determine the position of the top of the garment along the side seam when taking measurements. Usually, we approximate the side height of the garment and refine it during the pattern drafting process. Therefore, I lower it by half a centimeter and confidently draw a new top line of the corset. Now I can trace the final side cutting line for detail number 3. Don't forget that this line includes a seam allowance of 1.2 centimeters. I then draw the bottom line. Getting back to detail number 2, we can draw a beautiful top line and trace the line of the previously moved curve. The lines I am drawing in red are those along which I will be cutting the altered pattern when it is ready for that. The last measurement we haven't yet marked on the front center is the clip toward neckline. It is the measurement which determines the position of the neckline in the center of the garment. Don't forget that we have raised the bust line by 1 centimeter. Locate the point from which we will measure. Find our client's clip toward neckline measurement value in the table. It equals 6 centimeters. Along an imaginary line that runs at approximately a 45-degree angle, I'm first marking 6 centimeters and then adding a seam allowance of 1.2 centimeters. This gives me the new point for the neckline corner. Since we are working with a high-necked pattern, I suggest that the corner is not below the bust line. I'm drawing the neckline corner at a height of approximately 1.5 centimeters from the bust line. The lowest point will be at the bust line in the garment.